Hi, everyone. Hello. I see some people still coming in. We have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to start. Well, welcome, everyone. Very glad to be here. My name is Patricia. I'm the head of sustainability for EMEA for Live Nation. I'm going to be your host today. I'm accompanied with these great panelists, which we will introduce in a little bit. But before we start, there's still some people coming in. I would like to set the stage and just explain a little bit what it is that we are going to talk about. I mean, of course, contracts for climate and including green clauses in the contracts. So we will do an overview of why now this is the time, or why we're talking about this. So for the past 2 decades, more or less, we've been working with voluntary green riders, with standards, sometimes voluntary, sometimes, especially lately, not so voluntary, more like request. So it seems that now is probably the time where we can start talking about, are we in that point where we shift from something that is just informative to something that is legally binding? So this is something that this conversation is been going on in different groups. One of them, so the Live Green project, they put together a multi-stakeholder team, which we have some of the members here with us, to really establish or set up or produce a green clause template done by the industry for the industry. So the panel today really is to talk about this project. We would like to be this panel. First of all, we will do an introduction of this project, but also we would like the presentation to be as interactive as possible. We are going to show this template, and we would love to have your feedback, to learn from you if there are any comments, any questions, any suggestions. The font is going to be very small, so the people at the back maybe won't be able to see it. So if some of you want to come to the front to be able to read it, please do so. So the next thing, so without much further ado, I would like to let my wonderful panelists to present themselves. Carol, would you like to go first?
My name is Carol Scott. I am the Principal for Sustainability at TAIT. We ideate and we create and produce live events in the themed environment and concert tours, and we're particularly renowned, I think, for staging and automation in concert touring. And I also sit as the chair of Live Green. So for those of you that don't know or aren't aware of Live, which I'm sure there aren't many, Live is basically the umbrella association of all of the associations in our ecosystem of live events in the UK. So we have 16 member organizations, and Live really is the voice of the industry to the policymakers, to the researchers, and to the industry itself. And Live Green, we are tasked with working out the pathway for sustainability within our ecosystem. And we, the stakeholders, have got together in Live Green. This is Live Green in action. We are producing a piece of work that we're going to give to the industry so that we can start putting green clauses in contracts. And this is Ross.
Hello everyone, my name is Ross Patel. I've been a talent manager for over 10 years, most recently with my management company Whole Entertainment. I'm also a board director of the Music Managers Forum, which is the world's largest membership of music managers. And as board director there, I also sit on the Live Green steering committee as a representative for that membership, and have been working with Carol and our wider stakeholder kind of group to build out this legal wording that we will hopefully get into contracts. Before I hand over to Tom, I wanted to get a quick temperature read in the room. Can everyone put their hands up if you're involved in events, production, a booking agency, or artist management? Okay, I don't think there's anyone that wasn't in that group, so this clause is going to affect you. So hopefully you guys will have an opinion on this, and I think part of this is to get that feedback in real time so we can be as effective as possible. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Schroeder. I can't even remember my title, Executive Vice President, I think, at Wasserman Music. I'm an agent. I've been an agent for over 20 years. As a company, we look after from Drake to SZA to Coldplay to Ed to Ray to Fred to all sorts of people, a big cross-section. I have worked with sustainability for about 10 years doing different things, and I think I'm sat here for two reasons. The clauses that you're going to look at are going to require agents to be a part of the process, and agents generally, including myself, are a useless bunch of people who are there to cut deals and to focus on their clients. We're going to be asked to do something very different, and somehow I've been roped into leading that cross-agency conversation, which we'll see how that goes.
Thank you so much. So let's start. I guess for me, the first question is how this project or this topic came about. Why did you feel that this was the right time to create something like this?
So I think it's definitely the right time. I think as Faye Milton in the room, I would credit her for this. She sat here at one conference and she said, if I sit on this stage for another year and we just talk about things, I am going to scream. And I felt her pain. And so to me, the time for talking is over. We are now in the time for action. We are in a time for doing. And so this is an action that we can all take, and this is something that we can all move forward. And the idea really came from the concept of once upon a time, we didn't have health and safety in our industry. We would go out on site and there would be riggers up in the roof and they would have no harnesses. We had people with no hard hats, no steel toe caps, no high-vis. It was a miracle that we didn't lose a person. And we could see that the health and safety executive were finishing their work in the construction industry and cleaning it all up, and they were coming and they were starting sniffing around us. So we formed the PSA, and we formed the PSA with really like a guideline of like, we need to get our own house in order before somebody starts telling us what to do. And we were really successful here in the UK and in Europe with doing it because we had legislation also coming in from our governments. So we had force from the government and we had industry wanting to take ownership of something so that we didn't have people telling us what to do. We didn't have so much success in America because in America they were more inclined to think we wouldn't be preemptive, we'll just wait till the accident happens and then we'll deal with the litigation afterwards. So what we could see was that legislation can make a change, and what we decided to do was to take this concept of health and safety from a nice, you may or may not do a binary situation, which was in a rider, and put it into a contract. Once it went into a contract, that was it. It was a legal obligation for everybody to start doing things. So we kind of had a eureka moment one day on a live call of, that's the thing that we need to do. We just need to take it from a binary to a mandatory and put it into a contract. So then we started creating a working group of who the stakeholders might be, of like an involved group, what that would look like. And then now we're at the stage of, we've created this first framework, this first set of wording. Now we're bringing it to the industry at large to get your opinions and to get your feedback and then see where to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that as well. There's, in terms of the timing, you know, there has been a few years of people adopting green riders. There's organisations that provide a lot of resource, and I think a few artists have been able to pick up on that, and we're seeing an increasing number of artists with significant leverage start to use their position and their power to collaborate with the likes of agents, venues and promoters to really drive their own sustainable goals. So I think we're in a position now where it feels like it's an appropriate time to shift it from what would be potentially an artist's choice if they have the resource and leverage to something that would be an opt-out, which we really can't imagine most people would want to do at this point. So that's the kind of exciting part.
Yeah.
I think all I would add to that is, so when I got really stuck into this conversation, I'd lose track of the years, but maybe like 2020, we got quite a long way down the lines, sort of separate from this. So there was me and two really significant managers, and we put our heads together. Now that was pre-COVID. Everyone had loads of money, and we were all cruising along really nicely. And it was like, okay, we can definitely build into this. And we were looking at offsetting strategies and refinement, and the conversations were all very positive. If you don't know, agencies are incredibly sort of territorial. But what we did is we took it out of the agencies and we went and met everyone on a sort of level playing field, and it was received really well. The problem was, and the problem still is, that COVID hit, and suddenly it wasn't a very good time to own a live agency, I assure you, but it was also a bad time for a lot of other people in the room too. And the financial situation is very different now, and actually the cultural situation is very different now to those years. So I think this is like a huge step forward, but it really is like the first step, and there's quite a lot of hurdles to go, from sort of artists losing their voice a bit, to artists losing an awful lot of income, to the cost for everyone going much higher. So we're trying to do this. It's the right time. It was probably a better time 6 years ago, but it's got to be now. But we're doing it with a whole set of hurdles that we didn't have 5, 6, 7 years ago, is the truth. There is not the money to throw around in the same way. And my real focus from the start with this has been a solution that works for everyone. Like, hats off Coldplay, hats off Ed. When they're doing their stuff, that's brilliant. But their business models look quite different to most touring models. And what we need to do is find a solution, or at least a conversation that's applicable from 100 tickets to 100,000 tickets. And we think this is the first step of that.
Thank you. Will you walk us through the process of how you came together and decided actually the topics that were within these clauses? Are there any pinpoints, or maybe Tom, would you like to start?
I think pre-COVID, it was like there was loads of people doing their own thing, and what happened when everything went tits up with COVID is we realized that we didn't really have these bodies. So there was no live music body, there was no one. So when the government sort of came to talk to us, who should we talk to? We weren't very sure who they should talk to, so we quickly put some of these groups together. And I feel like that kick-started, we're all doing so well, we're making so much money before COVID, that we didn't really need these bodies. There was no purpose to it. We could just do our thing. And I think COVID showed us that maybe life's not quite as easy as that, and we were going to have to do something. And I think Live Green, which came off the back of, I think, Live UK, I think it's called, is a real sort of plus from COVID. And I think it managed to bring together, I remember doing my thing, this guy, Kaius Pawson, wonderful manager, runs a record label. He's done a thing with labels called Murmur. But then suddenly Earth% were calling me saying, what about us? And I was like, but I don't know about you. And what's happened is this has all come together, and you've got really brilliant minds now working together, and not in a typical music industry way of how can I make this beneficial to us? So I'm sat here as Wasserman Music, but I'm really not. I'm not trying to win for them. I'm trying to get this going for everyone. And I think generally there is a real positive vibe like that.
Yeah, I think to expand on that point, we're in the position now where we're not isolated pockets of agents, managers, and vendors. Now we're all working together, and we're now able, from a whole systems perspective, to talk through what that means. So what does it mean when a clause goes into a contract for an agent? What does it mean for a manager? What does it mean for a vendor? And we're all in the room, we're all talking. So then we can iron out all the problems one after the other. And what we're not creating a situation of what often happens in sustainability is you have whack-a-mole. You think you've solved a problem here, and up pops another one over here. So really this piece of work has taken a long time. We've been at it for about a year, but that's because we want to make sure that what we deliver and what we're suggesting is something that really is going to work for everyone. So it's not just, we haven't said to the legal team at Wasserman, for example, or ATC, create as a clause, and they go off and do it. We've gone to everybody and said, we value, we respect your opinion. How is this all going to tumble down?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an incredibly collaborative exercise, and I think that's been very reassuring, and I think that's a reflection of what seems to be happening in the industry and has been happening for the last few years. I think there's been a snowball effect of collaboration, especially as it relates to climate issues, because I think the urgency is very apparent, and I think we all know that we don't have time to mess about anymore. So I think that's a positive thing. We're also not delivering this and sitting here saying this, we are right and this is what the industry needs to do. This is very much we've brought a working team together. We've tried to answer all of the questions that we possibly can internally, and we've taken guidance and advice from experts in every possible sector. And now we want to share that with everyone and hope that that's received well and positively and continue to build on that. It will be a working a working program, but it does feel like it's at a good point to be able to share it.
I think just to add, so the way you get the attention of certainly agents, but promoters, managers, and artists to a degree, is money. And what happened in the summer of 23, and we went through it with Jamal the other day, is almost every single week there was a weather issue in Europe. So there was a festival that got pulled. It felt like every single week. I'd love to actually know the stats on it. But there were mudslides, there was high wind, there was rainfall, there was temperature issues. And, that's how you get an industry to look. It would be much better if we could get ahead of it. But the reality is we're chasing our tail a bit and we're playing catch up. We've got a huge situation in Australia in terms of weather and insurance. But because it came to our doorstep in the summer of 23, and I fear the summer of 24, we've got people's attention. If you're losing money, that's people's business. We're now having to factor that in. So as a company, we looked at the summer of 23 and worked out we lost X percentage of shows due to weather. Should we build that into our model moving forward? That's how tangible the situation is.
And something I'm interested in is, of course, this is called Clauses for Climate, but are you only interested or discussing environmental issues, or have you also thought about social issues to include in these clauses, or for now it's just an open template where people can, adapt or target to their specific industry, well, not industry, but in this case, there's a specific company?
I mean, I think the fortunate or unfortunate thing about the climate issue is that it is in its very nature intersectional. And when we tackle climate issues, we're often tackling social impact issues. And I think that that has to be at the forefront of all of our decisions moving forward, not just the people sat on the stage, but everybody in the room and beyond that. If we're not thinking intersectionally, then we're not thinking in the right way. I think specifically with this clause, it is tackling climate issues because I think trying to get people's attention focused onto multiple things and driving that through with a really clear message is going to be challenging. And I think for us, this felt like the pointiest point that we could go in with that is understood by everyone in the industry and has a very clear set of guidance attached to it, which is what the clause lays out. So we're tackling many of the same climate issues that would be brought up in any circumstance. So, what does it look like for travel, energy, food? How can people incorporate that into their events, and what are the right questions that they need to be asking? I think by improving a lot of that, we are, as a byproduct, improving social impact. I think we've also seen examples over the last few years where many other aspects have been built into live clauses, and they're addressing things like insurance that wasn't there before, and like ticketing and what that looks like, because obviously there's a situation there that needs to be discussed. So I think these things will happen naturally. And Tom, I mean, you would have seen how much has changed in contracts over the years. But I think what we're seeing is a demonstration that it is possible to rework existing frameworks and make them more inclusive and more positive and more future-proof, if that's even possible, but at least addressing the issues that we're seeing today.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, this is a wonderful piece of work, but all it's really doing is pushing the conversation back to the top, because we agents are going to go and have to have a whole series of conversations with managers and promoters and venues to work out what this all means, and that's going to push the conversation back up. But and I don't want to be a miserable sod, but there's a glaring sort of omission here, and that is the lack of engagement from artists with this cause. And you can all pretend that it's not the case, but I'm afraid it is the case. So you have great swathes of the music performing population who still see flying in a private jet as aspirational. And why should you and I tell them that it's not? Like, it's easy for me as a 46-year-old with 3 little children to go, look, you've got to do this now. But if you're 22 years old and you're working your butt off and it's much easier to fly in a big jet with your crew, then you try and tell them they can't do it. And I think that we still have, I think it's, if I'm honest, I think in music and pop music, sustainability is rarely talked about. I think there are other causes, other social causes, which are much higher on the agenda, especially with certain groups and genres. And we all have to accept that to have this conversation. You can't go in pretending that my roster of artists is calling me every week saying, Tom, when are we implementing a new Green Rider? Because they're not, right? It's us taking it to them and saying, listen, you can actually change something quite significant without having to scream from the rooftops, and in their heads then be attacked back for flying with private jets, for shipping on a Boeing 737 and not on a boat because the timelines don't work. You know, the problem with touring is it's essentially terrible for the environment, and you've got to allow us to improve it and make it a bit better and then a bit better again, as opposed to like ripping us to pieces, because you can't turn a multi-billion-pound industry on its head overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really valid point. The point about conversation, maybe we should touch on like the practical, the practicalities of what is going to happen here. You know, it's like when we present this, if we get it into contracts, you'll take it to Wasserman, you'll embed it in every live contract, and there will have to be a conversation between the promoter or the venue and you and the manager about what is this that we're now reading that wasn't there before, and what does that mean for us, and how do we approach that? And that's going to be, it's going to kick up a real storm, and rightfully so. That's the intention. Some people, like a very small percentage of people, the Jack Johnsons, the Bring Me the Horizons, the Billie Eilishes, they're going to look at that and go, we're already doing that and 10 times more. Here's our rider. That's everything you need. Wicked. Everyone else is going to go, what are we doing? Like, we've never seen this before. We've never engaged with it, and we don't know what to do. And I think there's a very real sense of needing to be prepared for that, needing to be able to offer guidance and resource for people that are looking to then have those conversations. But essentially, it just means that if someone's going to strike it out of a contract because they absolutely cannot adhere to those things, the wording says that's fine, but then how are you going to make sure that you don't strike it out next time we do a tour with you? What does that look like? What's your plan? How can we help you achieve that plan? In terms of resource, Live are looking to build out a resource section that is, going to be based on all of that. There's also, what Earth% have, there's Music Declares Emergency. There's enough organizations in the industry now that we can signpost people to things. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
I think what's going to happen...
You're going to have a lovely time.
I think what's going to happen is everyone's going to ask for help.
Yeah.
So I think almost everyone will agree to have these put in as standard, but that only means so much. What's then going to happen is the artist teams are going to turn to their production teams and say, can you look at this and can you improve what you're doing? And I think the first thing the production teams are going to do is phone me or Emma or Lucy or whoever it is and say, who do we contact? Who's the expert? How do we do this? We don't know what we're doing, and we're too scared to move forward with it. We've got very, very limited money, all the way to the top of the tree, by the way. The money's been cut enormously. And how do we refine, how do we improve what we're doing? We don't know what to do. And we've talked about it as a team, and I think that's hugely positive. So if that happens, that's a bit of a win, because it's, again, starting a dialogue that's just not there at the moment and hasn't been there since pre-COVID. It's hugely positive. It's just an awful lot of work that's going to happen post-implementing it.
So,
I think,
sorry, Carol, no, please.
I think also as well, it dovetails beautifully into the work that A Greener Future have done with the European Association of Venues, Arenas, and the National Association of Arenas here. So there's already been preemptive work done in the arenas. There's already lots of people doing lots of really amazing things in their own organizations. So Live Green is hooked up with an organization called the Music Sustainability Alliance in North America. They had their first conference on the 5th of February, so we've had, 16 or 17 years of doing this event here, which is like, we've got momentum like there's no tomorrow, and we're Europeans and we're all behind sustainability, yay. In America, it's a much steeper hill to climb. There were about 200 people came into LA that day, and it was impressive to see from AEG, Live Nation, from the agencies, from the record labels. They all had directors of sustainability, directors of ESG, chief impact officers. So the world is changing. It's not that this is being introduced and that we're just saying, boom, we're all going to change tomorrow. The infrastructure and the groundswell has been there for years, and it is now coming to a point where we're at the top, we're ready to go, we're on the edge, and we now can fly. So we've presented this at the MFF, so Ross got us down there. We did not have anybody disputing any of this. They were like, we're ready, we're here to embrace it, we are going to go. There is nothing to hold us back other than ourselves. We can do this. We created an industry out of nothing. There was no rock and roll when my father-in-law started the business. We've invented it all the way down the line. We're in a box now because we made that box. We need to start thinking out of the box and start thinking what serves our audiences the best. So this really, you can take this away and you can change it and you can adapt it and you can modify it to make it work for you. We're just asking, make it work. Make it work, and let us be an industry that humanity can be proud of. Because if we just sit here and say, this is the way we do it today, and this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way we're going to do it tomorrow, nothing will change. It's in our hands. So I think this is the moment for us all to change.
Thank you, Carol. So maybe now is the time to actually show what this clause looks like. And hopefully most of you can read it. Is it possible? Okay, yeah.
No, maybe not.
Actually, I thought it was a bit big. No, this is the biggest we can show. Okay. Yeah, it's a bit difficult, right? Even for the people at the front. Maybe someone can walk us through quickly, that we don't have to read it all, of course, but just maybe like an overview of why you chose, for example, reduce waste, why energy, renewable energy, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
sorry, Rose, that I'm interrupting you. Please, at any time, let us know comments, feedback. Again, this is for the industry, by the industry, and as they were saying, this is really guidance to support people that maybe are starting and don't know where to start. Maybe those that are more advanced, instead of having just one page, they will add 2 more. So again, this is for all of us. If you have any questions, at any time you can just raise your hand and we'll listen to you. Sorry, Ross.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so the premise of this is it's an agreement between the artist and the promoter to use their best endeavors to tackle sustainable issues as it relates to the shows that they're being contracted to do. There's enough research that's been out there for a while now in terms of the core aspects of sustainability that need to be tackled. So it relates to waste, energy, water, and food. So it's basically saying if you're a venue and you have the capacity to look at how you're using your energy, how you're managing your waste, what food you're serving, can you move to a more plant-based menu, these kind of things. This is now in the contract that says, yes, we can do that and we'll do that. And it also says, if you can't do that, why can't you do that? And what are your plans to do that? With a basic understanding that we know that that's what has to take place. There are things in there, again, about how the promoter will look at the relationship with the audience. And then there's some stuff in there about how we're going to measure the impact of the carbon footprint, looking at potentially the transport and also the ticketing systems and what we can build into there. I think fundamentally, the last few points in there refer to anything additional that an artist wants to include. So there's an acknowledgement that any artist might already have their own plans, they might already have developed certain things with their production teams that they are implementing on their tour, and that the promoter and the venues are acknowledging that that is what is being presented, that's what's being asked, and then looking to kind of make sure that they achieve that. And again, we've got case studies where this has been done. Mm-hmm. We've got an ever-growing number of artists that are using, as we said before, their leverage to have these collaborative conversations. I mean, I know, like Claire, you've been involved in some of that, and I don't know if Jamal's still in the room, but yeah, he's been involved in some of that, and Tom, you would have been across this. So, I mean, I don't know if are there any examples from your artists where you've kind of seen someone come through and say, this is what we want to achieve, and that's come to fruition?
Billie.
Yeah.
So Billie Eilish obviously grabbed this with both hands. But I do want to give you some scale. So I think there's a panel today about the 1975 show at the O2. Brilliant, hats off, super important. Little me, just me, I do 2,500 shows a year, okay? In my company, there's about 25 agents. My maths isn't good enough, but that's just one agency, and that's just a European one. So the Americans will do more. So it's not about one, it's all progress, but what we need is that this to sweep across everywhere, so that all of my 2,500 contracts a year have a reference here and start a conversation. And it's not just Billie doing her thing, it's an accepted part of all of the ecosystem. And we've never successfully done that, and we still have to execute this. So we need it not to be the exception, but to be the rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you were saying that this is not in a vacuum. I mean, of course, this is not just out of the blue and we're proposing this. I mean, this is being, in the last couple of years, included in, we've seen it in some writers, and so it's, many people will be familiar with most of the requests, I guess. So which takes me, what do you think are the biggest pinpoints or barriers that we can find, or that the challenges that we need to overcome or find solutions to implement, or to make sure or ensure that these clauses are really included in the contracts? And also, it's another question, but I'll just throw it because I see that we're kind of running out of time, so maybe we can just bundle up. We need to make sure, I think, that we don't leave anyone behind. So sometimes these clauses, especially for those that are starting, maybe are too scary, and they might be afraid that they're running out of business. So how can we ensure that this is something really for everyone, and that we're not just putting people out of business? So yeah, I guess it's just about barriers. Anyone wants to jump? Rose, I see that you're nodding. Maybe you want to go first?
I mean, I would say that we're coming at this with a base level understanding that not everybody is going to be able to achieve everything that's being recommended. This isn't us coming and beating people over the head if they don't have the resource to be able to shift. And that's going to appeal to a lot of the grassroots venues who just aren't in positions necessarily to resource huge amounts of change, but arguably their impact is much smaller anyway, so maybe we should just let them move at their own pace. This is more for people in the sort of mid to top range who, arenas, theatres, stadiums, where they have the ability, they have teams, they have impact officers, they have sustainability directors. What is it that they're already looking to do? And can they give us some of that feedback when it comes to booking a tour? Can they say, oh, actually, you know, when it comes to reducing waste, just so that you know, here's what we're doing. And we can then start to gather all of that information and start sharing it beyond, you know, just the conversations that we're having internally. That's a big part of this as well, is to be able to get a register of who's doing what. How sustainable are these venues? If an artist wants to go and tour the most sustainable venues out there, what does that look like? So over time, we can build up a much clearer picture of that and add that into some kind of resource section. But I think really it's going to be about hearing back from people. So I think, you know, that's part of that.
I think the hurdle is money. You know, I think the hurdle is money. And I think that there's not enough understanding, I don't know about this room, but as a whole industry, live industry, there's not enough understanding of where artists are, where promoters are, because you see the headlines and you see the glitzy show and you look at the Taylor Swift business. The Taylor Swift business is like a different thing. Like the rest of us are here, that's Taylor Swift. But there was a stadium tour last year, a huge stadium tour last year, lost money. You know, I shouldn't say this. I have a tour at the moment. It's grossing about 12 million US. The artist is losing money on the tour. You don't get to Brixton and suddenly start buying flashy cars. You know, the artists put all of this money back in because it's their dream to play the O2, it's their dream to play Hammersmith. And the first thing managers and tour managers and production managers are going to do when they look at this is go, we don't have any money. We are running this on a shoestring, and it won't look from the outside like it's a shoestring, but for them it's a shoestring, and there's not enough profit there. And I think that is going to be a hurdle, but probably from within it lies the answer, because more efficient touring and scaled down production leads to less footprint and more income, and everyone wins. But that is a mindset that's really easy for us to talk about. But when you're 21 and you're doing the biggest show of your life, and I'm there telling you, put that laser away, too many spotlights, it doesn't work.
I guess we would like to open the stage to the audience. If there are any questions, comments. We have here, I think there is a mic. The gentleman here on the front.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Julian from Music Declares Emergency Germany. And also, kind of like my specialty is audience travel. And I was trying to read it back also, and I think I succeeded with most of it. And I think this is such a great initiative. But I also see it follows a very common narrative. I mean, the first thing you put up there is reduce waste. And I think, I mean, I'm sure you have considered this, but the audience travel is such a big part of the emissions. Yet in this example of a contract, there's a very, very vague clause about, you know, there should be ensure that tickets for the events encourage attendees to choose lower carbon means. But there's so much more you can do. So why did you limit this particular clause, or why wasn't this as concrete, or like as, you know, like you have water fountains front of house and back of house. That's very specific, but at this point not.
Because that one is not directly in our control, because the infrastructure required for all of the transport to come to the venue belongs typically to the local authority, not to the ecosystem of our industry. So we want to use our position to influence, like town planning or whatever, and however we could do that, but we can't control that one aspect. It's not that we don't perceive it as being important, we completely understand, but really the focus is get our house in order, so that we can start saying, actually, we're quite good at what we do, and so we'd like you to mirror us and be as good as what we do, but we're not there yet. We need to get our house in order before we can start telling other people how to do things. We can work with other people, and Professor McLaughlin, she speaks beautifully to it when she comes and talks here. We're just not quite there yet. It should go to the top.
I think there's also
in years to come.
There's also an element that is this needs to be a little bit open to interpretation for each individual. This is when you talk about the range of people that are going to be seeing this. It is literally every venue of every size in all of the UK and hopefully in the US. That same thing isn't going to apply in the same way. So one possible route to answering or to responding to that point in the clause could be, okay, you're a festival, you read that clause, maybe you partner up with Equilibrium, maybe you make sure that the tickets are attached to some kind of coach journey, and there's a pathway to saying, actually, yes, tick that, that's what we're doing, and you share that back. And I think that's the kind of thing that we need to do, and if someone can't do that, why can't they do that, and how can we help them get to it? And that's also okay. We're accepting that that will be the reality in some instances.
I think you have to think about the audience traveling isn't just an audience, it's an artist fan base. So you will not get young artists to be dictatorial to their fan base. And you particularly won't get them to do it when they're flying in private jets and moving 5 trucks around the whole time. And I think I cannot emphasize to you all enough how scared artists are of making this stand. Like the downside, there's many, one of the significant downsides of cancellation culture is you're seeing less young artists be much more passive. Whether it's, I don't know, Gaza, cost of living, knife crime, sustainability, it's much harder. They feel it's much harder for them to take a stand because if they get it wrong, which is what happens when you're young, everything can go down. And I think the bit of dictating to an audience how you travel to my show, just they would perceive it as opening the floodgates to hypocrisy. And I think more than that, this is a starting point. It's just like the beginning of the conversation. And there's loads of improvement we can all do beyond this, and refinement and additions. But what we can't do is sort of try and crush it in one foul swoop. I don't think that works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we also didn't want it to be super lengthy. There was more wording, but it definitely wouldn't have fit on the screen, and nobody would have been able to read it at all, let alone us trying to grab it off the screens here. So I think there's an element of how do we keep this concise, recognizing that it's already going into a contract with lots of other clauses that people have to work through themselves. So there's a sort of practical element to that. Thank you.
We have another question here. Thank you for the question.
Hello, my name's Amber. I work for a vendor. This is fantastic. I think the artist contract is a really great step. And I think the scariest thing, which you've mentioned, is the buy-in from different parts. So coming down and as an agent, coming back to your production team and saying, we're going to need you to buy into this, we're going to need you to speak to your team about how you're going to deliver that. Further down the chain, they've got that ready to go. They've got all that information regarding power calculations, track packs, sustainability within their own processes, the equipment that they purchase, the carbon that's embedded in those particular products, that's all there. So that isn't a scary question for those vendors. And I'm only mentioning this because there's a lot of it ready to go, but it is so varied. Our chain and our ecosystem is so vast with so many different entities pulling together. And this is a fantastic place to discuss those choices and discuss those partners to work with, because if we partner together, this becomes less scary. So the more specifics that people are looking for will develop because of those simplistic ones that are already there. So I just wanted to mention that as a vendor further down the chain, ready to go, this is going to make our life much easier. We're already putting it in our quotes, we're already putting it to our production teams and our production managers so they feel, and tour managers, that they've got the information if it comes across. And that's great. So, the conversation to share that is really important. And yeah, I'm really happy that this is there. So thank you very much for working on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman here, and I think that's the last question. Sorry, I know we have another one here, but we don't have the time.
Thank you. My name is Dale Vince from Eco-Tricity and Forest Green Rovers. And I just wanted to pick up on the point of this being a starting place, which I understand, and also the classic dilemma often perceived to be greater than it really is between money and the environment. And a legal point, actually. Best endeavors means it includes spending money on achieving something. And so it might be more acceptable to more people if you change it to reasonable endeavours, which doesn't include that interpretation in law.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, good feedback. Thanks, Dale.
Thank you. So we're actually 1 minute over. The panel is done. Thank you so much, Tom, Ross, Carol, for preparing this. I assume this is going to be open source. Is it already available or not yet?
We just need to do one final iteration and then it will be good to go, and we'll share it. We'll share it out through all the associations, and we'll move forward that way. Could we just have a quick show of hands of who would embrace this and here and now?
Not bad.
Cool.
It's pretty good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
everyone.
everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Nice.
Thank you so much.